So yeah, as Annie just said, I'm Joseph Attwood. I'm an analyst at Analysys Mason, and I'm going to be moderating this panel, What Evidence Have We Seen of Cloud Native Supporting Faster Innovation? I've got three panelists with me who I'll let introduce themselves shortly, but I'd like to remind everyone that there's also a Q&A box at sort of the bottom of your screen, and I'll leave about 5 minutes at the end for questions, and also maybe ask the panelists some throughout. So Diego, Francisco, Patrik, could I ask you to, first of all, if you're there, and could you please introduce yourself, your company, and sort of what you do at your companies?
Yeah, with pleasure. Hi, everyone. My name is Diego Olerni. I'm a principal cloud architect at Voice, which is Vodafone Intelligent Solutions. I work in the IT platform engineering department, which manages shared platforms for Vodafone entities.
I'm Francisco Javier Ramón. I'm the manager of multi-cloud tools in the global Titan.ium unit of Telefonica. And we drive technologies that are common to more than one kind of cloud or multiple sites, so they are homogenized in the way of they are operated.
Hello, everyone. My name is Patrik Rokyta, and I'm Chief Technology Officer at Titan.ium platform. Titan.ium delivers off-the-shelf and customer-defined products and solutions to communication service providers, and we take pride in our 25-year leadership in signaling, routing, subscriber data management, and security software and services with a product portfolio spanning 2G, 3G, 4G, IMS, and 5G.
Great, thank you. So to start us off, I just want to quickly ask, what do you think cloud native is? So what's its definition for you? And in terms of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, how is cloud native relevant to you? So if we go the same order, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working with cloud for a long time now. And to me, cloud is more than anything a mindset shift. We can identify a lot of features of cloud, a lot of characteristics, but to me, cloud more than anything represents a mindset shift where agility is front and center, the most important aspect. A lot of us these days recognize that containerization is a strong point of cloud, but that's not the only strong point of cloud, and it's not only confined to cloud. So I'm very careful when my colleagues and myself identify cloud with containers. It is that, but it's a lot more than that as well. And flexibility and scale, for me, is also one of the most important aspects of cloud.
Francisco, do you want to add anything?
So, well, I tend to agree with Diego on the approach, but I would try to provide, some context of the different things that are floating around cloud native concept. I think that one is the goals. What are we expecting from a cloud from a perspective of being moldable and being simple, so it does not involve hidden steps here and there to make things adapt to the reality in terms of the scaling, in terms of heating or whatever. So that is from the perspective of the expectations that have been for a while in the cloud, and somehow the public clouds in SaaS and PaaS services we were providing with their own recipes for many years. And the other is that is commonplace mentioning containerization. And I agree that it's not the only ingredient of the solution, but it has added a lot of tangible procedures that are common in industry. It has provided some real standardization of the way that we can follow cloud native procedures. So it's an enabler more than the goal of being cloud native, but it's clear an element that is essential right now for deploying applications in a cloud native way. I hope that we'll have some time to elaborate on this, but my take is that is part of the solution, but it's not the solution. It comes together with a set of practices that if you follow them together with the enablers that are provided by the containerization, they provide you a recipe to achieve those goals. And I think that is the common confusion on what comes first, right? If what we want to achieve or the tools and enablers that are there.
Great, thank you. Patrik, do you agree with what's been said? And I mean, in your organization, how are you sort of aiming to achieve cloud native?
Yeah, I probably will echo most of what my colleagues already have said. So for what I do, the term cloud native refers to principles or practices that communication service providers and telecom suppliers have embraced for over 5 years now. And these practices not only define how monolithic network functions transform into lightweight single concern containers that can be deployed at any time through fully automated processes. We elaborated already on that. They also fundamentally change how we work and how we collaborate. So cloud native is not just a technical shift enabling us to build telecommunication products and services faster or release updates more frequently. It's also about embracing a mindset of continuous improvement, encouraging fail-fast experimentation, and applying principles such as infrastructure as code, continuous integration, and continuous deployment, to name just a few.
Great, thank you. So I think from your answers, we've had a lot about how cloud native might bring benefits from an innovation perspective. So got frequent and fast upgrades, sort of individual microservices, got better automation, improved scaling, improved openness and observability, sort of the ability to co-create services with with vendors. So Diego and Francisco, from your perspective, what's sort of the most tangible benefits you've got from cloud native from an innovation perspective?
I'm looking at the question from an IT perspective. I know it's a mobile event, but I work in on the IT side of things. So from an IT point of view, for me, one of the most important changes that cloud has brought to Vodafone is the agility and quickness of decision making. We've been able to make snap decisions and change course very quickly compared to what would have taken probably 6 to 12 months in a purely on-prem, let's call it old style approach. Obviously, data centers still play a huge role, especially in telcos. But at the same time, for the platforms that we're working on, the ability to switch, for example, from one vendor to another in light of a big increase in licensing costs, for example, has allowed Vodafone to save a lot of money by leveraging the flexibility and the power of the cloud.
So you'd say in terms of your organization, you've definitely been able to achieve this agility and sort of DevOps ways of working with cloud native.
Yes, obviously we're not a startup. We're not a software vendor releasing features every other week. But in the context of a telco, compared to what our pace of change would have been 5 to 10 years ago, I notice a huge change in the quickness of making decisions and acting on them.
Great, thank you. Francisco, have you got anything to add about how cloud native is bringing innovation in your organization?
Yeah, I think that the expectations of the cloud in general were clear in terms of agility. That was the idea, but there were some hurdles. There were some natural hurdles that the cloud native approaches are breaking. I mean, the first one is that there was a trade-off between agility and stability. You could be proficient in the way that you operated, and you could bring that border farther, right? But not too much. But now the cloud native technologies are bringing a set of expectations in the way that the elements behave, and also the know-how that you can inherit from previous experiences. So that moves that trade-off, that border of the trade-off much farther, because right now we can change this more quickly, because we can take for granted if some I would say some best practices have been followed, that the behavior will be predictable, even in a continuous environment, in an environment in a continuous change. So that gives us a much bigger level of security, and even on the expected behavior. And also, something that is important is that this is a matter of transferring know-how on operating an application at some level. And this provides some rules that are common to many applications, right? That are well known. So you can transfer, you can bring all the baggage and experience on operating a cloud native environment and cloud native applications to you from one to another. That was something that you could not do entirely in the past with, say, just plain VMs, right? Because they involve a complex choreography of their own, each of them totally different. So you need to relearn from scratch, and you could not make any assumptions on the potential change or the potential behavior after, say, a failure in a device, in a physical device, or an expectation after you scale traffic in a given manner. And here you can have, as an entry point, if you are doing the things well, you can take them as an initial point and make sure that you can move faster without compromising the stability of the services that you are delivering. So that is a great advantage for a continuous innovation, even if you are not the own developer of your applications. Even if you are running third-party applications, the knowledge transfer, considering that there are some practices that are commonplace, is much simpler to operate because you bring that baggage to you. So that is an excellent advantage. As I said, it's a set of enablers and good practices. You need to combine both to achieve the benefit.
Great, thank you. Patrik, one of the things we talked about during our preparation call was the implications of APIs and sort of cloud native. So about being able to sort of expose capabilities and products with APIs, and from a vendor perspective, obviously that's got implications on how you build your products. From an operator perspective, it's got implications for co-developing products with your vendors. So could you elaborate on the implications of sort of API exposure for cloud native software in a telecoms context?
Yeah, sure. So the way I see it, the service exposure via APIs is one of the key characteristics of cloud-native solutions. So obviously, rather than enhancing the core function by adding new capabilities directly to creating a monolithic system, new services are integrated via APIs as separate microservices within the overall solution. And in fact, we know it, the entire 5G core is built around service APIs with its service-based architecture, now extending even into radio access network, aka Open RAN. And then packaged into containers, new services come with their own dedicated resources, such as CPU, memory, and storage, their own development lifecycle, and where appropriate, even their own software stack. So the microservices-based approach is pretty flexible. And moreover, once standardized, APIs enable interoperability, and we all see the significant API standardization efforts being driven by industry bodies such as 3GPP, GSMA, and for example, TM Forum. But what I want to accentuate or underline is that APIs do more than just expose individual services. They can expose network functions or networks or even entire platforms. This enables especially external development teams to build on top of the telecom infrastructure without needing deep knowledge of complex telecom protocols like diameter SS7. And as a result, these developer teams can focus on creating value-added revenue-generating services, accelerating innovation and time to market.
Great, thank you. I'd like to sort of pose a question to the room, sort of building on what we said earlier about agility. Obviously, I can see how this is beneficial from an innovation perspective, but how do you balance sort of this faster release cadence with ensuring software is sort of well-tested, secure, and of good quality? I mean, there's obviously going to be a bit of a trade-off between innovation and sort of good quality software. So how are you approaching this in your organization?
Okay, yeah. So in my opinion, innovation and product quality or agility and security are not mutually exclusive. I do not see them as a trade-off. From my perspective, balancing agility and innovation with delivering secure, high quality and well-tested software really comes down to embedding quality and security into every stage of software development. So how does it work at Titanium? First, we shift left. That means that integrating We integrate testing early and often so that issues are caught as they are easiest and cheapest to fix. And I see continuous integration pipelines as the backbone here. They automate not just builds and deployments, but also quality gates like static analysis, security scans, and test execution. And that automation allows teams to move quickly without sacrificing reliability. Then second, we embrace progressive deployment techniques such as canary rollouts. This allows us to release new functionality to a small subset of components or users, validate performance and security in real-world conditions, and roll back quickly if needed. And this way we stay innovative without putting the entire system at risk. And we also rely on standardized conformance tests to ensure that our products follow the best practices for cloud-native implementations. And these tests cover all essential aspects of cloud-native design, including security-related practices such as implementing the principle of least privilege. And finally, it's about culture. So when teams are empowered and take ownership of the product from code to deployment, the results are both fast and high quality.
Great, thank you. Diego, did you have something else you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, well, I agree with Patrik. Everything that Patrik said, I see that applied in Vodafone as well. One thing that, in my opinion, helps for us in particular, you mentioned governance. Well, Vodafone invested a lot of time and money in applying safe practices, so scaled agile practices across the company. So that doesn't only apply to software engineers, that applies to planning, that applies to budgeting, etc. So by having a strong process around agile practices, we still can have that element of governance that was normally present in traditional or waterfall development methods. Also, repeating what Patrik said, shifting left, so involving, for example, our security colleagues from the get-go is an important aspect. Yeah, as I mentioned, governance. I look at things from an architect point of view, but the same can be said from a software engineering point of view. We do have these strong practices that we adhere to, and we have feedback loops. That's most important. Feedback loops that allow us to reevaluate what has been done. If there have been mistakes, then they can be reassessed and corrected. Deployment practices like blue-green or canary deployments, they are obviously paramount to delivering solid software to production.
Great, thanks. I think that links nicely back to what we said at the start about sort of cloud natives, not just the technology or design pattern. It's really sort of people and processes as well.
Absolutely.
So Francisco, a question for you that sort of brings up one of the points you raised earlier about from a telco perspective, you don't develop a lot of your own software, or at least on the network side, and you're sort of just getting it from your vendors. So I think you mentioned earlier that cloud native can still bring benefits to you, even when you're not developing new software. But I mean, in terms of sort of stuff like agility, telcos have sort of a traditional challenge with networks of the fact that you need extremely extensive testing before anything can touch your live networks. So how do you get around this problem? Well, I've two questions then. First of all, can you really get the same benefits from cloud native when you're not the one producing the software? And secondly, how can you keep up a fast release cadence in a sort of a telco environment where everything needs to be really well tested?
Well, actually, I think that we are capturing most of the benefits of cloud native precisely because some of these cloud native best practices tied to cloud native bring us is uncertainty on the behavior. Regardless of the black box that you are dealing with, because there are some expectations that are set, and they have some benefits. I will try to be clear on a few of them. One is that, I mean, they enable you to operate things declaratively, which means, sorry for the strange word, which means that I can define the desired state in one declaration. That is huge because in the past, in all the past technologies, you had some degree of steps and choreography involved in making things work as expected. So the past of operations condition the future steps that you have to take. You can imagine the complexity, right? And that goes away. If you can take for granted that an application can, or an infrastructure, by the way, can be run in a declarative way, that means that you can take for granted what is the actual state and what was the desired state, and how you can change that. So you forget about all the choreography. You simply focus on what is the intent. And that is huge from the perspective of operation, because it normalizes a lot of things that in the past you had to understand how was the charm that you had to invoke, right? That's one thing. The other is that there are things, obviously, that are not part of the commonalities. And that's been mentioned. I mean, the parts that involve some choreography that is particular for each of the applications, but even in those cases, since you can take for granted the other part, recreating the conditions that you have in production in an isolated environment and moving that workload efficiently to the other part, making sure that the things are taking exactly as you tested them to production, and not involving some channels of documentation, some channels of some platforms that need to be reconfigured, because you are managing, essentially, you are managing data that describes how things should behave, including the authorship, the changes, how to do a Rockwell rollback. That facilitates a lot the way that you operate. So in the case that you are the developer, probably you know how to solve it yourself. But in the case that you are not the developer of that software, but still you need to run it, you need to guarantee that the procedures that have been applied in all that change of testing are not tampered, right? And that precisely is what these technologies bring you, because you are managing the data that describes exactly for a machine or for a complex system in the cloud native environment, how things were tested and under which conditions. So you can recreate them with near zero error, right? So that is a big thing. If you are running third-party applications, you want to make sure that in all the steps, including, because in the first steps, you have probably someone who is close to the developer next to you testing. But in the last stages, particularly in the second time that you deploy, probably they won't be very close. So you want to make sure that the conditions can be recreated over and over in case of failure, or even do a rollback and know that they will be a safe operation. So there are clear benefits even if you are not developing your own software. That, by the way, there is a share of our software that is developed by teams in Telefonica. But the common case, particularly in the network, is that you are running, you are deploying third-party applications that are particularly complex. So this is a great benefit.
Great, thank you. Diego, I'd like to sort of follow up with this question for you in an IT context. So I imagine that for part of what you're doing is working with solutions from other vendors and sort of helping your clients integrate that together. I mean, what is the importance of being able to take sort of cloud native software from other vendors?
That's an interesting question. And I think that the cloud native point here is really important. Obviously, I'm not going to name names, but we mentioned containers as an important part of trending cloud behaviors. In recent months, we were evaluating a vendor who had two versions of their application. One was a traditional version, and the second one was a containerized version. So, on paper, it's a perfect candidate for the cloud until you look a bit deeper into the requirements of this container, and you realize that even though this is a containerized application, you still cannot scale the application using cloud best practices, but you go back to your vertical scaling. So going a bit more in the technical here, so I'm not going to dig too deep into that. But effectively, what's happening is that you have an application which is catching your attention because it's supposedly adhering to these cloud best practices, containerization, scalability, etc. But you look into it, and the actual secret sauce of the cloud, which is the ability to scale horizontally, is not there. So to go back to your question, I think the importance of working with vendors and making it clear to them that offering a containerized application without the actual cloud native behaviors and mindset behind it is not enough, right? So you really want to have an application that you can deploy leveraging the flexibility. I mentioned flexibility, quickness of the cloud. I didn't mention the on-demand nature of the cloud. So the fact that you can scale up, but also scale down. You can meet your volume of traffic depending on the conditions on the day or on the hour. And that means that you can both meet your performance requirements when volumes are high, but you can also reduce your costs when volumes are low, and you can scale down your application or your platform. If your vendor doesn't work with you and doesn't offer a cloud native application that you can then scale up and down, then it's pointless, right? So again, closing the loop on your question, I think it's very important to do your due diligence on what the vendor is promising and what the vendor is actually delivering. And at the same time, when you have a good relationship with your vendor, it's really important to pass on your requirements to them, to work with them so that they can at least put on their roadmap your future desired features or requirements and work with you to achieve those.
Right. Thank you. That's really useful insights. We've just got just over 10 minutes left, so I'd like to remind the audience, please post your questions in the Q&A box if you haven't already. So for the next question, I think we go on to something that Francisco, you alluded to earlier without mentioning it, so which is Kubernetes. So you talked about sort of the declarative automation, and obviously the reason why it's so easy to do that is thanks to the capabilities of Kubernetes. But as well as sort of just that project, there's other sort of cloud native projects in the ecosystem that can potentially be a big boon to both operators and vendors. So I'm thinking of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, the CNCF, has got 200 plus open source projects sort of specifically designed to sort of take advantage of these cloud native design patterns. So sort of a question for Patrik and Francisco. I mean, what is the importance of the open source community for driving this innovation, cloud native? And I mean, how are you using these projects? How are you contributing to these projects? And sort of, what benefits you see here?
Maybe I can start from here. I think that is essential. I mean, you mentioned CNCF, and I think that actually Kubernetes is just one project of CNCF, in fact. And the way that Kubernetes can be extended by the mechanisms of CRDs and operators, that essentially is adding new type of objects that can be stored in the cluster, is repositioning Kubernetes from being initially a platform for running containerized application to a generalized API for running cloud workloads, which is different because essentially what you are following the same philosophy that was followed in the early days of Unix, that is combining pieces, elements that do quite well one thing, and you can put them together under the umbrella of the Kubernetes API. And that is the way of combining projects from CNCF in a cluster. I think that is one of the big advantages. And also from the perspective of open source, and I'm happening to serve as chair of one open source project at COSM, is that we are focused precisely on realizing that that reality is on organizing the intents properly. So you can manage not just an isolated cluster, but a fleet of clusters following that paradigm, taking for granted that the work that is happening in CNCF is sufficiently relevant, and I comparing it to Unix because I truly think that is creating that level of normalization. Now the next challenge, the challenge that comes next, is not about generating the internals. It's about how to coordinate the intents in a large fleet of clusters with different roles and with different security constraints, and making sure that we don't make mistakes. Now the challenge is about manipulating that data effectively more than running choreographies of orchestrators. So yeah, definitely, I mean, having that ecosystem is great because it simplifies the problem a lot.
And I mean, is there a benefit from the fact that a lot of this can just be pulled straight from the general IT world rather than sort of telcos having to do it all themselves?
Well, actually, we are it's a consequence that in our case we are the same organization. We are running both telco and IT workloads, the same teams, the same selection of technologies, everything. Because now, I mean, there are better traction. Obviously, I mean, telco is just a vertical of that use case. So it's better that you are not doing the things on your own, because the development of the technologies is much bigger than what you do in telco. So we benefit a lot of acknowledging that reality.
Great, thank you. Patrik, what do you see as the importance of the open source community for cloud native? And I mean, how are you using open source projects in your products?
So from my perspective, the open source community, and particularly through the CNCF ecosystem that you have mentioned, is foundational to driving innovation in the cloud native space, simply because it enables the industry to build on collective knowledge and accelerate development cycles and sure avoid reinventing the wheel. And in this context, CNCF plays a key role in designing solutions that extend beyond the core competency of any single company, including Titanium. So CNCF projects allow us to focus our internal efforts on our core differentiators, such as signaling, security, and routing, while leveraging proven community-driven solutions for common platform capabilities like access and identity management, observability, telemetry, and message queues. And this modular composable approach aligns perfectly with the microservices mindset. In fact, as Francisco mentioned, most of the container services running on Kubernetes originate from CNCF community projects. So the ability to plug into a rich ecosystem of CNCF tools and quickly adopt best-in-class solutions rather than building everything from scratch is a clear accelerator. And another reality is that compared to virtual network functions, the extent of integrating third-party software has significantly increased in cloud-native designs, along with the amount of work that comes with it. And moreover, attention must be really paid to providing the level of support expected for critical telecommunication infrastructure, as well to complying with the security guidelines defined for cloud-native network functions and with the licensing terms associated with third-party software and libraries. So at Titanium, we thoroughly observe licensing terms as part of the software composition analysis process and integrate the software as is without modification and in full compliance with the licensing agreements. And we report critical issues encountered during testing, and so more or less stay engaged with CNCF project communities.
Great. Thank you, Patrik. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I think I'll ask one more to bring us to the time. So this is a question I like each of you to answer, and it's just about going back to sort of the title of this panel, which is what evidence have we seen of cloud native supporting faster innovation? So, I mean, I'd like to have some quick final thoughts to you about whether sort of cloud native truly is unlocking faster innovation and whether it will continue to do so in the future.
I'll get it started. I'd like to start by saying that since I joined Vodafone, I noticed a great increase in maturity when it comes to cloud adoption and cloud best practices, etc. I've seen the company going from trying to figure out what the cloud was and how to make good use of it, to having mature teams applying strong security controls, as I mentioned, best practices on cost governance, etc. So that is an important signal, in my opinion, of how important the cloud is to a telco like Vodafone, which is, as I mentioned earlier, we're not the cutting edge of software development, so can only imagine what a software house, the use they make of the cloud, right? But then to your question, did I notice an actual change in the way we leverage the cloud to make quick decisions and to foster innovation? Definitely. So in the last 4 or 5 years, we developed platforms from scratch. We quickly pivoted when the MVP didn't meet the expectations. We could create and destroy environments on, the snap of the fingers, again, to mention Francisco and Patrik. One of the beauties of the cloud is that you can have a declaration of your intended state. So if you want to destroy an environment over the weekend to reduce the impact on your budget, but then you recreate the same environment on Monday morning, you can do that. And again, this allows telcos who obviously these days everybody's trying to reduce the operational budget, right? So how do we innovate and create new platforms or new applications by keeping our overhead low? The cloud is one of those things, with the caveat of cloud requires a focus on cost governance, because the spend on cloud can get out of control very quickly if not done properly. So that's my thoughts. Have I seen innovation? Yes. Has the cloud empowered us to create that innovation? Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Patrik, do you have any comments?
So out of my experience in telco, definitely teams adopting cloud-native principles build services faster and recover from failures more quickly and are more adaptive to the changing market requirements. I've seen cloud-native implementation go from concept to delivery in weeks instead of months, something that wasn't feasible with traditional approaches. And additionally, capabilities that didn't work well in virtualized environments are now natively supported within cloud-native ecosystems. There's real evidence that to support that. So again, absolutely, cloud-native is unlocking fast innovation when implemented thoughtfully alongside the right supporting processes.
Great, thank you. Francisco, your thoughts in the final 60 seconds.
Well, I think that is, after all that we have described is clear. I mean, cloud-native principles and the enabler technologies are helping a lot. Not only on the reduction of the time to the deployed application, that is clear, but also on the repeatability of what we do. And it would be hard to imagine in the point where we are that given the volume and the complexity of the services that we are running on that fashion, that we have to take a step back from those practices, because probably we'll be able to achieve it, but with a substantial amount of effort and suffering, because this does not do all. I mean, you need to do a lot of work for running any real service and maintaining it up and running. That's always the case. But I mean, considering the reduction on the amount of side effects that you could find in the past, I mean, it would be unbelievable that with the current size, we have to take that step back. Definitely, I mean, cloud-native principles are here to stay, and probably to evolve further on the direction of making our life simpler for, I would say, behaviors that we take for granted, or we want to take for granted.
Great. I see we're at time now. So yeah, thank you for all our panelists and thank you for everyone for attending.
Joseph,
Annie,
thank you for sterling service there. And to Diego, Patrik and Francisco, thank you so much as always.